Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. We bring you thought-provoking guests and topics every week to challenge your thinking about leadership. Our aim is to help you become the leader that you wish you always had as we learn together and lead together. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honoured today to be joined by two of my dear friends, Alisa and Tony DiLorenzo. They're parents of two children, passionate about helping couples create their own extraordinary marriage. To do this, they the publishers of books, including the one that we'll talk about today, The 6 Pillars of Intimacy. They do coaching of couples, and they also have the #1 marriage podcast called One Extraordinary Marriage Show. And that's where they connect with an audience of over 50,000 listeners, giving tips on how to maintain intimacy in your marriage. As you can imagine, what we'll be doing today, though, is we'll be taking those tips about intimacy, about one extraordinary marriage, and we'll be thinking about what leadership lessons that we can take from that. And I can tell you, I'm a huge fan of the 6 Pillars of Intimacy book. It's amazing for everyone out there that's in a relationship. I highly recommend it. But today we're going to unpick where some of the common threads are between how you keep an extraordinary marriage versus what it means from a leadership point of view. So without any further ado, Alisa and Tony, please do say hello to our audience and share us a little bit of your rich story about how you ended up doing this work together.
Thank you so much, Mick, and welcome, hey, to everybody who's listening or watching. It's truly an honor and a blessing to have you here with us. I'm Tony, beautiful wife, Alisa DiLorenzo here, and One Extraordinary Marriage started roughly about 12 years ago. We just celebrated our 26th wedding anniversary, but those weren't all wonderful years. And so we had probably about 11 years that were very tough. Mm-hmm. For us, for our kids, for those around us. And we made some shifts at that point in time in our lives, which brought us to a point where we felt healthy. We felt like it was a time to speak into marriages. Mm-hmm. And so 12 years ago, January 2010, we stepped behind our microphones for the first time. And with the sole mission of impacting one marriage, we have been blessed, though, to impact tens of thousands of marriages since that time.
Absolutely. It's been, it's funny. It's like in leadership where sometimes you find yourself in a role where you didn't necessarily know you were going to end up. Yeah. But you get there and you're like, okay, this situation has presented itself. And that's very much what happened. Our marriage was not in a good place. We took a step of faith to go, what if we could make it better? Like a lot of leaders do. And we ran with it into this place of saying, what happens if we start changing the world one marriage at a time?
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. And first of all, congratulations on every level. 26 years of marriage, absolutely wonderful. I saw the photos on Facebook. I was very joyous to see the smiles on your face on that day. Also, congratulations on the success of the podcast. The #1 marriage podcast. That's just amazing. And think about the number of lives that you're impacting. Because when there's a healthy marriage, by the way, there's a healthy family. It's not just the couples that you're supporting there. You're impacting so many lives in what you do. Can I ask, you're very open, by the way, in the book that it wasn't always smooth sailing. Was there a specific moment in time where you both looked at each other and went, right, this is not working. We've got to try something different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When our kids they were 2 and 5, they're now about to be 17 and 20. We were in a really low point in our marriage. As a lot of listeners who, if they've got young children, you can really get into that season where it's all about caring for the kids and just getting caught up in the household chores. And we had gotten to the point where we were really good co-parents, mm-hmm. and we're living more like roommates than lovers, more like almost like business partners instead mm-hmm. of a married couple. And it was at that point that we knew we had a couple options. We could get divorced right then, but our youngest was 2, and I wasn't real excited about having to co-parent in different homes with Tony. We could wait until she was 18 and just kind of be miserable for 16 years, or we could get radical. And fortunately, I am married to a visionary who tossed out a big idea, and that actually changed everything.
Yeah.
What was that big idea?
So the big idea was we were actually watching on TV a couple of shows. Some friends of ours, their kids were doing like some beach tennis, and the next segment up were these 2 couples who they had both done these sex challenges. And I'm watching this at a low point in our marriage, thinking we could do this. Something could change. We could do something drastically different in our lives, and change it for the better. And so as that segment was coming to an end, I looked at Alisa, because we were about to lead a small group study at our church, and we're going to talk about sexual intimacy. I felt like at that point in time, many years ago, that it's not something that wasn't spoken in the church. And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, Alisa, and in my head, I'm thinking, Alisa, we're going to do an 8-week study, roughly about 60 days. If we do this, what could happen? And so I looked at her and I said, what if we do a 60-day sex challenge?
And I immediately said no. Quick to shoot it down. Yeah. And I think a lot of times, just knowing that we're talking about leadership too, I think a lot of times for leaders, you can get into that place where your team is just like, nope, not going to do it. This isn't a good idea. And that was the dynamic in that moment. And I also got up and put on like a avocado green face mask.
Well, she went to the bathroom to get ready for bed. And in my mind, I'm like, well, okay, she said no to that, but at least tonight we can probably have sex. And then she comes out of the bathroom with this green face mask on. And I'm like, well, I guess that's not happening tonight. Yeah.
But the next day, having slept on it, I call it my come to Jesus moment, or literally I was standing in my garage with a basket full of laundry. And the thought went through my head, if you're not willing to try, if you're not willing to make your marriage a priority and see what's possible, it's very likely that your marriage is over. And so he came home. I said, I'm in.
And I was deer in the headlights because I had moved on. I'm visionary. I've tried many of things in our marriage to move that needle, and nothing had moved it. So I knew rejection. I understood it, and I didn't dwell in it. And so I was moving on to something else. So she tells me I'm in, and I'm going, in for what? And then she goes, let's do this challenge. And that's deer in the headlight moment, going, oh no, what if I can't perform? What if I can't hold up my end of the bargain? What did I just get myself into? So that happened pretty quick, and then looked at her and said, okay, let's do this. And we came up with some parameters for us for those 60 days. And we ended up completing 40 of those 60 days.
Just wonderful. I'm so glad that you did it. And now you're sharing some of the secrets of your...
So are we.
We're glad we did it too. Because that 2-year-old is now 16, almost 17. And if we hadn't changed our marriage, it's very likely
we'd be looking down.
We'd be getting close to getting divorced.
Yeah, well done. And now you're sharing some of not just that part of the journey, but the rest of the journey with other couples, which is just amazing. The 3 things that I'm taking from this. The first one, and there's leadership lessons in this. So if you're sitting out there as a leader, think about this from a leadership point of view as well as your marriage, right? The first one is Einstein's famous rule that doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, is the definition of insanity. So what you saw was that it wasn't working. We've got to try something different. The second one is that you set an intention. I'm going to come back to intention in a moment, of doing this for 60 days. That's like building a habit. Now, on average, it takes 66 days to build a habit, by the way. Same with leadership. If you're going to try something with your team, don't just try it once and go, oh, that didn't work. You have to have some kind of habituation of this new habit. And that third one is that intentionality, that you set the intention that, no, this is important to us and we're going to do this thing. Tell us about the role of intentionality in building your extraordinary marriage.
We believe that intentionality is everything. I think there's there are a lot of myths surrounding marriage. And one is that it just happens, right? That if we love each other, we'll be able to get through any storm that comes our way. We don't have to, yes, we were intentional about dating, and you have to ask your, future spouse out, and you have to have those conversations, even planning the wedding. There's so much intentionality. And then I think there's this expectation that, once we are, we say the I do, then we can stop being intentional and we'll just kind of coast to happily ever after.
For the next 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And
the statistics don't bear that out. Right. With the divorce rates, worldwide, the truth of the matter is that lack of intentionality is destroying marriages. It crumbles the foundation, because if we're not intentional about, the challenges that our spouse is facing, if we're not intentional about how we talk to each other or how we're spending time together, then you just get into this place of disconnect. Right. And where it's like, I don't know who you are anymore. I don't know what you like to do. I don't know why we're not spending time, because we're not talking about it. We're not saying this is the most important relationship, and we have to be intentional. We have to spend time. We have to continue the level of curiosity that we had at the beginning. We have to do the things. I mean, there's the adage out there that says, do the things that, for the girl, do the things that got the girl, and you'll keep the girl. And I would say that works both ways.
Yeah. Yes, I really love this about the intentionality, because what we have a tendency to do in our relationships and as leaders is we can get into autopilot. We can go, okay, yep, we're done now. We're married and we committed to each other for the rest of our lives, and we forget to actually keep on doing the things, right? What we all want in the world is to feel like we matter. So if you're a leader, it's your job every day to make your team feel like they matter. If you're in a loving relationship, it's your job every day, not just one day, not just at the start of the relationship, to make your significant other feel like they matter to you. How does that sit with you?
Well, I have to share with you, Mick, as you were saying that, one of the things I say most often to my coaching clients to tie into this is that every single one of us has this need to be seen and heard. And the equivalent of what you were saying to matter there. And so, I encourage my coaching clients, what can you do today that your spouse knows that you see them and they know that you've heard what they had to say? And the same thing is true in leadership, right? How does your team know that you aren't just dismissing them, or they're not just, a report bringing you a report, but rather somebody that matters to the organization? Because without them, in the same way that without your spouse, you don't have it. Right? You don't have the organization. You don't have the marriage. And so what can you do? And this is something we have to practice. Tony and I are not perfect.
Nope.
We continue daily to work on how do we make each other feel seen and heard. And some days we do better than others. But the same thing is true in an organization too. Some days are better than others.
All right, powerful lesson there. What are you doing today to make sure your team feels seen and heard? What are you doing today to make sure your loving partner feels seen and heard? You brought up an interesting thing there. I've got to say, and I am guilty of this, 100% guilty of this. I see the two of you and I see one extraordinary marriage, right? And it's inevitable for me to start getting some comparison syndrome. Okay, well, Tony and Alisa have got everything sorted out there. They're this Instagrammable, perfect couple, but you're saying that's not true. You're saying that even you, in your extraordinary marriage, you're working at it every day. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. I think for us, we're able to share that through the One Extraordinary Marriage show. And it's always been our desire to be open, honest, and transparent. And so in these snippets of social media world, it may look like Tony and Alisa are doing awesome. And yet we really determine that, it's not only about our marriage, but we need to let other marriages and other people know that there isn't this perfect marriage that we all desire. I think we sometimes have been lulled into believing that a marriage can be taken care of, a fight or an argument or something can be taken care of in 30 minutes or an hour and a half. It's like we go from amazing, we have a fight, to we go to the pinnacle in that hour and a half movie, and we're able to week by week share the highs and the lows that are happening in our lives, in our marriage, and share that with the one family so that they can listen and go, I'm not alone. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting you bring that up, Mick, because prior to just getting on with you, I was reading a message from a gentleman who's been married 4 months, found our show today, and he was finally able to go, wow, listening to you guys has helped me to realize that I'm not alone, that what I'm going through is I'm not the only guy just sitting in this house dealing with this, and hearing you guys share rejection and share these different areas has given me hope. And I'm like, that's why we get behind our microphones and just are open, honest, and transparent about what happens in our marriage, so others can listen in and go, okay, I'm not alone.
Yeah. I was just going to add to that, comparison, whether it's in marriage or in leadership, doesn't do anything but paralyze you. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, there's healthy comparison where you're like, oh, okay, look at where, that person or that couple has stretched and what they're doing. But we never know, whether we're talking about leaders or we're talking about marriages, what is happening behind the scenes. We don't know what a couple or what a leader has gone through to accomplish or to reach, the point that they're at, so that they are, putting those posts up on Instagram or whatever. And, maybe they've got all the accolades behind their name, but are you willing to go on the journey that they went on to get to that point? Are you willing to invest the time, the money, the effort to get to that point? Or do you just want to get to that, you want to shortcut it and get to that point that, looks Instagram beautiful? Where I would say, for us, I mean, we've been working at this thing for 26 years. You can't have a marriage at 4 months that you have in 26 years.
Yeah, I really feel, Alisa and Tony, that this is the root of where imposter syndrome is kicking in. There's so much imposter syndrome out there. More than 90% of people suffer from it in some level of imposter syndrome, and second-guessing themselves, having their own limiting beliefs. And I feel like it's increasing. I'm going to study this. I'm going to see if my hypothesis is correct. But I feel like it's increasing in an Instagram world. And by the way, I enjoy Instagram just like everyone else, but it's this comparison, right? So if I sit there, even if I think about my own account, like I'm prolific on LinkedIn, I'm putting leadership advice on LinkedIn every day. And if you just read my LinkedIn feed, you would assume, Mick, he must be the perfect leader. But I'm not. I make mistakes every day just like everyone else, but I learn from them every day, right? So and that's what makes me a better leader, is because I'm always working on it. And the same thing with your relationships here. If you're in a loving relationship and you're always comparing yourself to the couple down the road, to the couple that you saw on Instagram that's on holiday or whatever, that's a snippet of their life. That's not their whole life. It's not real life. They're seeing what you want them to see. What tips can you give to people out there as to how they can still enjoy those feeds and take lessons from Instagram or any other feed, but not to go into this comparison and to just live their own life?
Well, I think first and foremost is you have to determine if being on those social media platforms, if you can do that, right? Because we were just talking to a couple yesterday, and the husband actually is not on Instagram. And he said it started out as a test to see if he got off of social media, would his life be better? And he actually came to the conclusion, you know what? I don't need to be on Instagram. And I think that's actually, in this hyper social media world, that's a decision that a lot of people actually have to take a step back. If they feel like, oh, I can't, live up, or I can't, measure up, or we're not as amazing as they are. Some of you may actually have to ask yourself, and it's a really hard question. How does our life change? How does our marriage change if I'm not looking at everybody else's marriage? So that's one step, is you may have to get off social media. Secondly, it's you're always reminding yourself, I don't know what happened behind that picture. I don't know if, the beautiful dinner or the beautiful holiday is also wrapped around, screaming kids in the background. And this was, the first meal came out with a hair in it and I had to send it back, or, what do I not know? What can I imagine? I tell my coaching clients all the time, I'm like, you're amazing script writers because our imaginations run wild. I'm like, think through your own life. What would it take you to get a picture that looks like that? And then assume that it took this couple all of that to get that kind of perfect picture. Because that helps me a lot of times. I'm like, especially like with friends when they take a picture, perfect picture on vacation or whatnot. I'm like, oh, I know their family dynamics. I know that those 3 kids were probably poking each other for 20 minutes before she got the one picture that's perfect.
Yeah. And I think as leaders, we have to be open, honest, and transparent with people and allow them to see who we are at times. And for us, leading the one family, we tell them often, this isn't about Tony and Alisa. This is about your marriage. How are you going to be intentional? How are you going to take action? Don't only look towards us or the person down the street. What are you doing to build up and strengthen your pillars of intimacy? And I think people need to hear that. Those who are leading need to go, hey, I have my own issues that I'm dealing with and I'm working through them. And yet at the same time, it's not about me and where I'm at, but how am I raising you up so you can be a leader in your area, that of your expertise. And for us, it's marriages. And for us, it matters because as we raise up marriages and we know that they are strengthening their pillars and they have the extraordinary marriage they desire, it impacts their kids, it impacts their neighbors, it impacts the family. And eventually it's a legacy that they get to leave. And so we don't want them to just look at us. We want them to look at themselves and go, I can do this through the teachings that Tony and Alisa give us.
Yeah, I love it. I'm hearing 3 things there. So I love Alisa's tip about, okay, if you see an amazing photo on Instagram, picture what it would have taken for you to create that, and then you'll get a better understanding of the real story. The second one was about authenticity, showing up as your authentic self. And then the third one is about, yes, you can learn lessons from other leaders, but don't mimic other leaders. You do you. You do you. Take those lessons and then build your own composite of the leader you want to be. How does that sit with you, Tony?
I love it, especially that last one, because there are times that we see folks in the one family and they'll be like, hey, we just went out on this date, and we'll see it. They'll share. We have a private Facebook group and they'll share these pictures and what they're doing. I'm going like, that's awesome, because they're doing a more like amazing out of this world date than Alisa and I would do. And so I have to put myself in that place of going like, that's their marriage. That's what they enjoy doing. And so I can't compare myself to their marriage now because they went out and did something that strengthened their recreational intimacy. For Alisa and I, it may mean just heading to a beautiful place here on the coast in San Diego and just watching the sunset. That's our amazing, date night.
Yeah, so don't copy other people. You can learn and take tips, but you do you. All right, brilliant. The next lesson I took from your book that I'd love to unpack is the concept of co-creation. What I picked from the book is that a marriage is not about one person. A marriage is not about 2 people. A marriage is about both of those people co-creating together the marriage. Tell us what that means to you.
Well, I have a sentence in the book, and to paraphrase it, it says, if you were identical, basically the 2 of you were the same, one of you would be unnecessary, right? And so when it comes to a marriage, when it comes to an organization, everyone is valuable, and we bring different strengths, we bring different abilities to the marriage, and looking at that, I don't need Tony if he's just like me. It would actually probably drive me crazy if there was 2 of me in this marriage.
I think at times we tried. We definitely tried to be like, hey, if we're more similar, we'd have less arguments or disagreements.
But the reality is that when you look at a marriage, it is an entirely separate entity, right? 2 people come together, they make one new creation. And it takes both people being participants in that to create that new creation. It takes learning about one another. It takes having that curiosity. It takes going through hard times and building up, great memories and all of those different things to create an extraordinary marriage. It doesn't just happen. It's going into this place of saying, what can we create that is better together than what we would do on our own? And
that is a constant thing that's happening. Because if Alisa and I were trying to live out where we were when we first got married at 23 and 22, we wouldn't we wouldn't have created what we have now. And we also know now where we've come from, that we continuously have to step in to create the extraordinary marriage. Just because we're 26 years married doesn't mean it's going to take us to 50 years. Like, we are still going to have to be intentional about what we're doing for the next 24 years to celebrate that golden anniversary with our kids and our grandkids and those, our friends and our family. But we don't stop because we made it to this point.
Mm-hmm. So 2 really powerful lessons that I'm hearing there. Alisa, I want to come back to what you said about if you're just like me, then one of us is not necessary. And then the second one is about creating something together that would have been impossible just by one of the 2. Now I want to flip that and think about team leadership and co-creation in a team situation. If all of your team are the same, someone's not needed here. And our job as leaders is to hold space and allow people to bring their individual superpowers together so that 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equals much greater than the sum of its parts. How does that sit with you?
It resonates so deeply with me because I think, and this is going back to what we were talking about a couple of minutes ago in regard to social media, I think we've gotten into this place where we societally want to look like everybody else and be like everybody else, but we're all given unique superpowers. I love that word. And when we do hold space for those superpowers and how they show up in different people, what gets the collective is so much stronger.
Yeah.
Because Tony has talents and skills that I don't have. We've brought people onto our team that are much better at certain areas of our business than Tony and I could ever be. And so stepping into that, we actually create something literally extraordinary. And when you do that as a leader, I want all the leaders listening to think about what's the potential if everybody was operating out of their superpower. Mm-hmm. What's the potential if we were, really embracing the differences instead of seeing them as something to be avoided or something to be minimized or shut down? What could we accomplish as an organization when everybody's like literally in their zone of genius and going after the common vision that we have as an organization?
So powerful, Alisa. And what I'm hearing here is that ability to hold space and to help people see what their own superpower is, by the way, because it's not always easy to read the label on the jar from inside the jar. So helping them see what that superpower is and then holding space to bring those superpowers together. And one of the common mistakes many leaders make is telling people what to do far too often, first of all. I think that's a well-known, obvious one. But also expecting other people to do the job the way they would have done it. Instead of going, hang on a second, I'm not employing these people for their arms and legs. I'm employing them for their intellectual capability. I better stop and listen here for a while and see how they would have done it. And I've got a common saying that says, different is not wrong. Different is not wrong. So if they've got a different way of getting to the solution that you're after, stop and pause and look at it and go, okay, is this a better way than I would have done it? Can you, let's do a reverse now. So I've given a bit of a leadership tip there. How could you put that into a marriage context, that what I've just shared there?
Well, it's funny because as you were saying that, I'm like, oh, I know exactly what I say on the marriage side. So I'm so glad you asked. So often with my coaching clients, I'll ask the question, what's more important? Is it the outcome or the process? Right? Because if it's the outcome, if we're just trying to both get to, like common complaint is like dishes or laundry. Like if the goal is we need to get the dishes done, does it matter, if the plates get washed first or the silverware gets washed first, if the dishes all get done at the end of the night? Probably not. But for some people, it actually is within marriage. For some people, the process really does matter. Some people like to have the towels folded in thirds instead of rolled. And that becomes an opportunity to really build an emotional connection with your spouse to say, actually, the process does matter to me. This is something that, I do want to talk to you about. And it's a way to build, one of the pillars we talk about in the book is emotional intimacy.
Yeah.
And so when the process does matter, when you're like, yes, the outcome matters, but I also kind of feel strongly about the process, being able to step into those vulnerable conversations with your spouse. And you think about the challenging conversations you might have in leadership where you have to set aside time to do it and to address areas of concern. Same thing is true in marriage, right? When we are getting into this place of going, it's more than just where we're trying to get it. It's how we do it. And I need to share with you as my spouse, as my partner, why that's so important to me and then we work together as a team. Again, it's that co-creation that we were talking about a couple minutes ago. How do we create a system or a process that works for our relationship so that we both don't feel the conflict or the tension, but we get into a place of unity?
Yeah. And it's interesting that Alisa brings up dishes, because in our marriage over the 26 years, that's obviously has changed a lot. Like, who's doing them? How are they done? And recently we were just talking about this because for some reason, our dishwasher, the way it's set up, I like having things exactly in order. Like we don't put the bowls on the bottom rack. Like, the bowls need to be on the top rack and all the flat plates need to be in their spot, where Alisa's like, just throw them in there and get it done. And so it was just sort of funny because we joked about it. I'm like, you know what? I can handle the dishwasher stuff because I'd rather have it in order. So when I do open it and I'm pulling something out, I know where it is. But it was just us connecting and just going like, hey, this is the way we want to get it done. And for both of us, it worked out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to play something back to you and see if I'm taking the right lesson from this one, because there's multiple things I'm hearing. I'm hearing taking the time to understand each other. What are your preferences? What are your emotional triggers? What matters to you? To be able to understand that in the first place. And then beyond that, there's an element of respect. And that is, I'll give an example from my marriage now. So, and my wife listens to the show, so I'm on shaky ground here, but that's okay. So I know that it's really important to my wife that I lock the doors when we're driving down the road. It's really important to her. It doesn't matter to me at all. And she probably gets upset that that doesn't matter to me, but it doesn't matter to me at all. But you know what I do? I lock the door because it's important to her. And I know it's important to her. So sometimes it's about respect and going, okay, this is really important to someone I love. So I'm going to do it anyway. And it's no skin off my nose. It's really easy to do. And then on the other side, it might be sometimes you just have to let go and go, you know what? Does it really matter if Tony stacks the dishes differently to the way Alisa does, right? So how do we balance that? Respect versus let it go and just go, it's okay.
It's coming back to this place of saying, what's the ultimate goal, right? If the ultimate goal is to have a marriage that is extraordinary, right? Not perfect, but extraordinary. And those are two different things. Perfect means we've got no margin for error. There, like everything, right, all the ducks in the row, versus extraordinary, which says we're in a relationship that is continuously growing. We're continuously learning about one another. We didn't stop all the growth on the day we said I do, but we continue to grow over the course of the marriage. Then we will choose to step into those conversations where we understand if it's about something that we need to actually respect and take action on, or if it's something that we can choose to let go, because we're in that growth opportunity continuously with our spouses. When we stop growing and when we say those things aren't important, that's where conflict and tension comes in. But when we step into a place of saying, you are the most, like, I made a commitment to you, you're the most important person in my life. And I'm going to actively, and again, this is not a perfect thing, this is a continuous thing, but I'm going to continue to learn who you are. And I'm going to continue, if the door locks matter, that's something that, okay, it doesn't make sense to me, but the door locks matter to you, babe. So I will lock the doors. Yeah. And on the other side, for her, what I would say is there might be times that Mick forgets to lock the doors. Doesn't necessarily mean it's World War III. It's just an opportunity to say, hey, honey, you know what? I really do appreciate it when you lock those doors. And you're likely going to go click. And it doesn't have to be a defensive thing. It's just that sweet reminder of this is something that's important to me. Mm-hmm. And that allows you to have both the when do I let it go and how do I experience offer respect.
Wonderful balance there. I'm going to bring it now to team leadership. I'm going to reference a former guest that we had because this was an amazing episode as well. So the first one is what I said before, different is not wrong. So hold space, and if someone wants to do something a different way, and it's, hold space and have a look and go, yep, actually that's a really good way of doing that. I would never have thought of that myself, but it works. And now you take ownership because you support what you create, and off you go. Well done you, right? So sometimes it's let it go. And then other times it's getting to know each other deeply enough about what respect means to that person. So the team leadership thought here is, apart from let it go and different is not wrong, is then around what we call the 7 forms of respect. And we had Dr. Julie Pham on the show, and she unpacked a lot of this. So here's some examples. Getting to know your team and know what is most important to them. So for some people, punctuality at the meeting is the most highest form of respect. That if you turn up 1 minute early, that is so respectful. And if you turn up 2 minutes late, that's so disrespectful. So if you've got a team member that feels like that, you need to know that, because it's important to them. And then another person, they might go, what's most important to me is creativity and flexibility, and I need space to create, and I don't need a process and all this kind of stuff. So understanding the preferences and what respect looks like for that person then can allow you to have that emotional empathy, that cognitive empathy, to understand what they're seeing and what they're feeling. How does that sit with you?
It's spot on. And it just resonates so deeply, because it doesn't matter if we're talking about the relationship that happens in the home or the relationships that happen in the workspace. When we can step into that place of empathy, of understanding, of knowing preferences, regardless at home or in the workplace, everything shifts. Because when those relationships are strong, the ability to do more is amplified, whether it's at home or at work. We can accomplish more because there isn't the tension, there isn't the disconnect, there isn't the conflict. We aren't bumping up against each other. I often liken it in coaching. A lot of times couples will feel like they're in a tug of war, right? Well, I'm going to pull my way, or you're going to pull your way. And what I tell couples is that when that happens, somebody's going to end up in the mud. Right. And I think the same thing happens in a lot of leadership situations, where if the leader is pulling and they aren't necessarily understanding preferences or superpowers, or, sharing empathy with their coworkers and whatnot, their reports, then it can feel like, well, the leader is pulling and I'm going to end up in the mud. Or the leader can feel like everyone else is pulling and he's like, he or she is like, what's going on here? Why are we not working together?
Yeah.
And instead, if we can adopt the mindset that we are on the same team, right? We're working together in a marriage. Our now 19-year-old son played football, American football, growing up here. And he was on the defensive line. His goal with his linemen were to go after the quarterback and make sure that they didn't score. Like, that was his one singular focus. Same thing in marriage. What is our focus? What is our goal? What are we trying to accomplish that's going to be extraordinary? Or in leadership, what is our team trying to accomplish? What is our mission?
Yeah.
But you've got to be on the same team and not trying to drag anybody through the mud or playing tug of war with preferences or emotions or things like that.
So I'm hearing alignment of purpose so everyone understands the mountain that you're trying to climb, but then taking the time to get to know each other so that you can better support each other on that mission because you understand each other's preferences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And as a married couple, you should have your own core values. You should have those core values. What makes up your marriage? It's an organization of maybe 2, 3 kids. I mean, if you had kids and you have those core values, you have that missional purpose. You understand if that's up in plain view, you understand who you are as a family and you live towards those. And even as a couple, you see those and you're like, oh, we serve together. Joy is in this home. And those words have power over how we're going to live out our marriage and our lives.
Yeah, so core values, another aspect of team and being able to communicate those with each other. Hey, this is important to me. It's really important that we play fairly. It's really important to me that we have a speak up culture. It's really important to me. Whatever, you finish the sentence. To be able to declare those to your teammates. And this is not just the leader's job, it's all of your job to say, hey, this is important to me that we behave like this. And then those behaviors will drive the congruence. And when you've got congruence, you can achieve so much together with that purpose alignment. Oh, wonderful. All right, so emotional intelligence, we tapped on it before. Tell us more about the importance of emotional intelligence in any relationship?
So within this exposure of intimacy, we refer to it as emotional intimacy. And that's the very first pillar that we talk about. And the reason why is because everything that we do circles around the communication that we have with other people. Our ability to understand not only what we're feeling, but what somebody else is feeling, the ability to create culture and environment where we can discuss hard things that maybe make us feel uncomfortable, but being in this place of saying, you know what, it's so important that we don't let things fester. Mm-hmm. I often refer to those festering things as infections. And like they become like an infection in a marriage where it's just like the resentments or the bitterness left undealt with. But even being aware, and I think this is so important for leaders too, what does your body language convey? Mm-hmm. What is your face telling those that you work with? What happens when you cross your arms or you take a step back or you let everybody sit on the other side of the desk or whatever that might be? How are you conveying that they're important to the organization? How are you conveying that what they bring to the table, their superpowers are important to you too? So you can look at these different things, that emotional intelligence, that emotional intimacy as an opportunity to really foster the strength of the organization. Because when people feel like, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier, when people feel like they're seen and heard, both in a marriage and in an organization, then their ability to step forward and do the hard things is magnified, because they know that if there's a problem, the door is open to talk about it. And so problems and conflicts can actually be minimized because of that, open door policy, whether it's in the marriage or in the organization.
And what I see a lot of within the emotional intelligence, emotional intimacy, is a lot of people will say, well, I'm not a good communicator. Mm-hmm. I grew up this way and my family was that way. So I'm unable to communicate my feelings, emotions, thoughts, desires, anything of that nature. And it's something that Alisa and I have realized over the years for ourselves and for many in the one family, is that this is a learned skill. Mm-hmm. And if you're in a spot where you feel stuck in this area, there are so many resources out there that you can up your game and you can learn. Mm-hmm. And so one of the ways that we share this with the one family, because they'll go, oh my gosh, Alisa and Tony, you guys just speak so great with one another. And you have this great flow and you're back and forth. And I go, you know why? Because Alisa and I were committed to getting behind our microphones for 30 minutes a week. And we've been doing it for 12 years. And we've learned. If you listen to some of those early ones, Alisa would say something that would bother me and I didn't like it. And so my inclination was just to talk over her, just to shut her down, because I didn't like where she was going and I didn't know how to address that. And so over the years, we've learned, and it's a skill, and we've seen it happen time and time again. People who come up and go, well, I can't do that. And I go, okay, well, step in. It's a skill. You can learn this. And we have seen those in the one family. We have an amazing couple. They've been married 42 years and they found us 3 or 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the gentleman didn't have that upbringing. Again, married 42 years, found us around 38 years. And you look at him now and he goes, what you've taught me to be emotionally engaged in my marriage, to strengthen my emotional intimacy. He goes, I can't thank you enough. And here's a man who 58 years old took the step to go, I can learn a new skill. And he has done an amazing job. And like, it's just beautiful to see what he has done and how that has impacted him, his wife, and his kids and his legacy. Mm-hmm.
I want to build on this because I think it's really important. It was one of my huge takeaways from your book, by the way. And I'm going to talk about learned behavior and then learned skill. And what I was taking away from the book, the story about you, Tony, coming from an Italian family where everyone expresses themselves very openly, and what looks like an argument is actually just a robust discussion. And Alisa didn't come from that environment where you don't express yourself so openly. So one of the things that we have that we should acknowledge is learned behavior that's built up over time. So if you lived in a household where no one talked about finances, it was never spoken about at the kitchen table, that becomes a learned behavior that you'll take into your future relationships. And if your partner had a different experience from that, that's where some conflict can arise, because one's come from a family that does, let's say, public displays of affection. Let's say that you come from a family that's very open of public displays and affection, and the other couple or the other member of the couple comes from a family where the parents didn't even hold hands in public because that was not the thing to do. You've got a learned behavior already. And then where the learned skill comes in is what I'm hearing, Tony and Alisa, is then you need intentionality to break that and go, right, I'm going to address this. We're going to address it together. How does that sit?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and with that, it's so true, because so many people stay stuck in that place of this is not my or this either is or isn't my learned behavior, and forget that, if you're not dead, you can learn new things. I tell my coaching clients that all the time. I'm like, you're not dead. We can learn new stuff. And so stepping into that place of saying, what would make this relationship extraordinary? Well, if that means that I need to learn how to, I might not be, going back to your example of public displays of affection, I may not be like throwing myself at Tony when we're out in public, but I can create systems in my own head. And this is actually a true story for us. Mm-hmm. Tony, very affectionate family, my family less so. And Tony shared countless times on our podcast that he loves it when we're driving in the car and I will reach out and put my hand on his leg. It is not an automatic behavior for me, but it's something that I know that is important to him. So I will tell you, Mick, there are many times we're in the car and I'm like, oh, like literally, this is the thought process that happens inside Alisa's brain. Alisa, you're in the car with Tony. He likes it when you put your hand on his leg. This would be a great time to put your hand on his leg. Put your hand on his leg. And then I reach out and put my hand on his leg. He doesn't know. I mean, he does know because I've shared this so many times, but theoretically, he doesn't know that I've gone through this entire thought process. And truthfully, he doesn't care, because I've stepped into this place of developing the skill of going, this is what I have to do to engage and give Tony something that matters to him. And I will practice that skill as often as necessary. Even if it doesn't become automatic, it's still part of my own behavior patterns that I can tap into, my toolbox, mm-hmm. to say, this is how I get to the point that I am reaching out and connecting with my spouse. And that can happen in any area of the marriage. You can put your own systems and processes in.
There's a really powerful lesson in all of this, I think, Alisa and Tony. I want to share it with you now, and this is going to feel like I get on my soapbox here for a moment, so please bear with me. This learned behavior then is what also happens with leadership, right? So to put it in context, we're sitting in a world where Gallup research tells us that only 20% of people in the world truly love their job and like their boss. People are spending up to 1/3 of their lives in these workspaces that either don't inspire them or, worse still, completely stress them out. But here's the problem. Here's the cycle. Is when someone is promoted into a leadership role, they're not typically given early in their career any guidance on what it takes to be a leader. What they do is they start mimicking the behavior of the leaders before them. And if 20% is our benchmark, there's a high chance that they had a leader that had some pretty poor habits. So what are they going to do? Their learned behavior is to go, oh, I'm the boss now. I do what the boss used to do. And the cycle just keeps on continuing. So what I'm hearing from both of you, to put this into a leadership lesson, would be, if you're in that situation where you're just mimicking the behavior of the boss before you, remember whether you even liked that boss before you start mimicking their behavior, first of all, and then stop, reflect, and think about what good leadership looks like and what kind of leader do you want to be, and start learning those skills. Don't just mimic the behaviors you've seen. Learn the skills to be the leader that you want to be.
Well, Mick, you asked in that an incredibly powerful question. What type of leader do you want to be? What do you want that culture to be like around you? How do you want the people that work for you, how do you want them to interact with you? I think so often we don't step into that place of self-reflection. Mm-hmm. Rather, we go into this place of autopilot instead of saying, wait a minute, I've been promoted into leadership. I have the opportunity to create and actually co-create with this team that I've been given, what does it look like to actually give myself a day or a couple days or a period of time to create that vision and then work with what I've been given to not just share the vision, but actually execute it. So what if we actually change those statistics and I become the team, I become the leader that instead of 20% being happy that they're working here for me, what happens if you flip that and you're the leader that 80% of your team is to that actually, hearing that statistic blows my mind, but thinking about what would happen if the leaders that are listening to this episode took what you just said there and developed the skills that they need to be the leader that they want, what that could potentially do to our world. That's mind-boggling.
Exactly. Imagine the engagement, imagine the productivity if people actually love their jobs again and were in an environment where they could do their very best work, right? So, yeah, really good. All right, one more topic I'd like to test, and this is another one that's common between marriage and leadership, and that's the element of trust. Tell me what trust means to you.
Trust. So funny being on the receiving end of that question, because so often I'm like, one family, let's talk about what trust means to you. And I define it. Trust is really, it's about creating a relationship where you are safe to share and you have created an environment where it is safe for the other person to share in that co-creation of understanding that the two of you will not always be on the same page, but you still always have the same goal. And making the assumption that the other person, specifically in marriage, that ultimately the other person has your best interest at heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this. So the first thing I'm hearing is about, once again, holding space, listening without judgment. So creating that culture where someone can speak up without, no, I'm not going to say without fear, because that's not true, because there always is some level of fear, but it's where the perceived benefit of speaking up is greater than the fear of doing so. And that's something that you create.
And that is a created behavior. You know, a lot of times, and I see this often in marriage coaching where, you know, when trust has been broken, right? We give trust so freely at the beginning of the relationship. And I think this happens too, you know, in companies and organizations. I trust you until my trust is broken. It is kind of the paradigm, the framework that we operate under. And it really comes when, you know, we have to think about all of those instances where trust has been broken, because then you learn, again, this comes back to a leadership thing. What do you do differently to create an environment where trust isn't going to be broken? Whether it is that open door policy, whether it is making time for those conversations, whether it is, you know, understanding that everybody on the team has a voice, just like in marriage, we both have a voice and we will come to a place of decision, or, you know, this is an opportunity in marriage where, you know what, it matters more to you than it does to me. So I'm actually going to abdicate my, you know, like putting my foot down or being anything decisive because it matters more to you. So I will go along with you. But stepping into this place of saying, you know what does it look like if, and I would say this, probably every leader that is listening to this episode has had a situation in their life where trust has been broken. I think it's hard to be an adult and not have that experience. Take the opportunity to think through those instances and go, what would have made a difference in that scenario? And then work to create that in your organization. Was it gossiping? Was it, you know, procrastination? Was it, you know, whatever it might be? What can you do to create a culture, both in your marriage or in your organization, that fosters the opposite of that fosters that connection, that openness, that opportunity to speak up? And then you foster an organization that is really built on trust. And again, becomes one of those places where 80% of the people are actually super excited and your productivity skyrockets.
And I would say within that, though, too, when it comes to trust, a lot of people will look back after they've forgiven, after they've moved forward, something happens, they'll go back to that time of broken trust and they'll relive it. And we have to stop doing that to ourselves and into our marriages and even to our organization. We've rectified, we've moved on. Trust may have been broken again in maybe the same way or in a different way. And yet we have to look at where the individual is at that point in time and what's going on. It's not to go back and rehash everything and open up everything that has happened in the past. And that's something Alisa and I have done well over our years. I think in the early years of our marriage, it was very common to, if something did happen, if we broke our trust in one way or another, big or little, we would go back and we would open up that box again and go, but you did this. And so because you did that, now I can't trust you ever again. And over the years, I think we've learned that, hey, we dealt with that. We've forgiven. Now we're moving forward and we're going to deal with where we are now. And I think that has helped us to grow. It's helped us to not fall into a cycle and a downward spiral of always looking backwards, but going, what happened now and digging deep now. Now, if it's something that's deeper, trauma, like consistent lying or inability to tell the truth, then we need to deal with that. And that's where a lot of it needs to go to somebody who can help with that, typically counseling therapy, marriage coaching, in marriage as well as in the workforce, because there are things that are going on underneath the surface. There are root issues that need to be addressed. And so we see that as being vitally important, and people not just sitting there who are hurting, they haven't dealt with something, that go get help. Because it's not doing you any good. It's not doing your marriage any good. It's not doing your organization any good. Go get help.
There's two really powerful things I'm hearing there, but I want to unpack them one at a time. The first one is what I'm hearing from both of you is that it is important to reflect and think about things that have happened, whether they be bad experiences, including the breaking of trust. But there's a big difference between, to use your word there, Tony, reliving it and then that becoming something that holds us back. It becomes a limiting belief where we don't put ourselves out there anymore because, let's say, our heart was broken once and we don't want our heart to be broken again. So that would be reliving it and then it becoming a limiting factor. Whereas what I'm hearing from you is reflect and learn and go, okay, so what were the circumstances that led to that? And how can I prevent it from happening next time? But you know what? I'm still going to put myself out there. I'm still going to step out of the shadows. I'm still going to step into the light. I'm going to go again, but I'm going to go again having learned from the last time.
Well, when we relive, we actually go through the experience again. It's why when we rehash things in our brain and we rehearse them, we can literally create those same, physiological responses all over again within our body. And instead, as you were describing too, I think, well, when I look at my reflection in the mirror is not doing anything to me. I can look at myself, I can see it, but there's no emotion there. But if I relive an experience, how different that is. And so as leaders, being in this place of going, you know what, let me reflect. Let me not get into the emotional state. Let me just almost look at it, as you were watching something on TV, on a screen, watch it, take the lessons learned and bring them into the future, but don't bring all the emotional state into the future, whether that's into your marriage or into your organization.
Yeah, I think you can acknowledge it, but you then let it go and then go, right, what did I learn from that? All right, so reflect and learn, not relive. Really powerful lesson there. The second one was about the culture. So it comes back to, Alisa, you said it before, deciding what culture you want and taking actions to create that culture. So if you do want to speak up culture in your team, what are you doing to reward and celebrate when someone speaks up? Even if you don't agree with what they said, are you acknowledging them and seeing them and hearing them and going, oh, thank you so much for speaking up, Tony. I really appreciate your point. And then having a conversation about it. What did you mean by that? And then off you go kind of thing. But if you don't reward and celebrate, people will, in fact, if you do the opposite, if you shut down the speak up culture, they soon learn not to speak up anymore. Yeah. All right.
It's one of those things where you create what you demonstrate.
Role model it, then celebrate and reward the behavior that you want and don't tolerate the behavior that you don't want. Yeah, very good. Okay, one more element of trust, and we've danced around it a little bit, and this applies in the workplaces as much as it does in marriages. What about admitting when you've made a mistake?
It's one of the most powerful gifts that you can give your relationship or your organization. Going back to what we were saying earlier about comparison or imposter syndrome, I think a lot of couples and a lot of leaders stay in this place of, I have to be perfect. And yet our humanity is actually what draws people to us, right? Whether it's the humanity in a marriage to say, you know what, I made a mistake. I didn't intend for this consequence to happen. Sometimes it's simply, I didn't realize this was going to have this impact on you. And also in leadership, when you can admit that you did something wrong or you made a mistake or you didn't, whatever. And it's not like this needs to be in a broadcast email to the entire organization, that type of thing. But there are key people in your world as a leader that need to know. Because if you're not perfect, guess what? The culture says we can be excellent, but we don't have to be perfect. There's space for me to make a mistake. And that can be one of the biggest gifts as a leader that you can give your people, because that will improve the productivity and the creativity if they know that, you know what, sometimes you make a mistake too. And we create a culture where we keep going back to what have we learned? What can I take from this experience where I wasn't perfect and I told my team, and together we problem solve it. I'm not throwing the problem to you and saying, guess what? You have to fix it. Now, I made this mistake. You have to fix it. I made this mistake. I need your help. We do need to fix this. But I realized I made this decision and it wasn't good. It allows everybody to come on board and to be unified. Again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, be unified in mission and in those core values.
Yeah. I was just going to say, in our 26 years of marriage, we've made many mistakes. And yes. I think early on, it was easier to put masks on, hide from those mistakes, bury them. And so the more masks I put on, the more I can go through my life without dealing with discomfort, right? Because I'm living a life that's not truly me. And I really do believe as we take those masks off, we are loved more, not less, for who we are. And so when mistakes happen, you have to look at yourself and you got to take off the mask. You got to get vulnerable. Brene Brown talks about this a lot, vulnerability. And what does that look like? And I really do believe if we have a spouse who's beside us and we believe we're on the same team, we are strengthening our pillars of intimacy. It's time to start taking off those masks, knowing that there's going to be some hurt, there's going to be some pain in it. And yet our spouse is going to love us more, not less, because we're being true to ourselves and who we are. And together we're going to be able to hold hands and we're going to work through those together. And again, sometimes you may need to have somebody who's going to come alongside you to help you through those rough waters. But when you get to that other side, when the waters are calm, it's truly you who's showing up in your marriage now.
Right.
A lot of powerful things there that I'm hearing. And I'm going to start with that, Tony, which is when you're wearing a mask, you're not showing up as your authentic self. You're not congruent, and it becomes exhausting for you. You'll wake up one day feeling, who am I? Who am I? What happened here? And taking off the mask and being vulnerable actually builds trust. It doesn't erode trust. It builds trust, because if you've made a mistake and you try to hide it and then someone finds out about it, that's the quickest way to erode trust, right? So being vulnerable creates that culture that Alisa's talking about. You're role modeling it so others will also be vulnerable and admit their mistakes. And the other powerful thing I'm loving today, Alisa, is your delineation between extraordinary and perfect. And now you've said excellence and perfect. So what we should be striving for is excellence, not perfection. Not perfection.
Perfection is unattainable. There will always, we're dealing with human beings, right? Whether we're talking marriage or organization. And so to expect people to be perfect all day, every day, it's unrealistic. And it sets up people for disappointment. It sets people up for feeling a sense of failure. It sets people up for hiding things. It sets up all of these behaviors that, whether it's marriage or an organization, we don't actually want. But if we talk about striving for, the extraordinary or being excellent in the workplace, that's so much easier to define and achieve. And it can become, again, that unifying place of saying, this is what we're working towards. I understand that you're human and I'm human. So we're not going to, we're not going for 100%. That only happens like on math tests, right? We have kids in school, math test, you can get 100%. Outside of that, everything else got a lot of gray to it. So what is our benchmark of being excellent, of being extraordinary? And let's together aim for that.
Yeah. Well, I have to say it. I'm going to use the words, both of you are extraordinary, and together you're even more extraordinary. I feel like I was already the number one fan of the DiLorenzo fan club before this interview. I'm now even more so. So thank you both so much. I'm going to jump to our rapid round now. So these are the same questions that we ask all of our guests. I'm going to switch up the first one a little bit. I normally ask, what's the one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20? For you, I'm going to say, what's the one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were 22 and 23, if I got the ages right?
Yep.
No, you got the ages right. Yeah, absolutely. I wish I knew then that I needed to be intentional much sooner. I wish I knew then that I should have been intentional from the get-go.
And for me is that we're on the same team. Mm-hmm. From that first time, that we're all on the same team, that no matter what we go through, we got this together.
Mm-hmm.
All right, brilliant. And I would like to hear from both of you on the rest of these questions too. So what's your favorite quote?
Oh,
I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4:13. That's mine.
Nick, that's so hard. I look at new quotes literally every single week for the podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh.
You don't have one that just.
I don't have a favorite one.
Yeah, that's not you. You're not a person who would have quotes up anywhere. You're just that's not Alisa. That's
so interesting.
Yeah.
Mine changes nearly every week or every month, Alisa. So don't worry about that. It's all right. What's your favorite book?
Ooh, favorite book. Well, the one that I just read that I absolutely loved and it changed our business is the book Who, which is all about hiring practices and looking at people. And again, going into superpowers and strengths like that. So most recent is Who. And then I would say prior to that, like I've got all these books sitting on my desk, books I can do. But real quick, here's 6 Pillars. This is a personal favorite.
I'm going to say mine because she'll just, Alisa is
books are my thing.
Alisa is a voracious reader. Like she reads, like
there are books everywhere.
She could tell you 1,000 books right now. For the marriage world, there are 2. It's called the Vagina Bible and the Penis Book. Mm-hmm. Fantastic reads. They are those books that
it's on my desk.
Every person needs to read individually, but then you read the other. So it's like one of those in marriage where it's like, hey, I need to read the Penis Book because I'm a guy and I need to know. But as a husband, I need to read the Vagina Bible to understand Alisa, because that's something we're not taught. So for marriage, that's mine. For business and personal, The Power of Positive Thinking. Mm-hmm. Norman Vincent Peale. I love it. I love the audiobook. I love that Norman Vincent Peale still reads that book. And I feel like it's my granddad, who I never really had, is just speaking into me and just going, hey, Tony, you got this. Stop that imposter syndrome. Stop that chirping that's not positive, and let's get moving.
Yeah, brilliant. You just made me think of something else from your book, and we're going to go on a bit of a tangent now. I feel like I'm reopening the interview. But we're tangenting for a second. There was another thing that was really powerful in your book, which was about bias, but it was also about feminine versus masculine. And I can't remember what chapter it was in, to be honest, but it really hit me when you said, it's not always. Men are always going to be good at finances and women are always going to be the maternal one, et cetera, et cetera. I love that you de-genderfied this kind of thing that, we hear it in the workplace all the time. Oh, you just need to be more in touch with your feminine side, or you just need to be more masculine. No, we're all individual human beings. And I love that you kind of remove that. Okay, final one. I'm sure people in the audience will be enthralled by everything that you've said today. And there's probably people out there that maybe need help in their intimate relationships. How do they get in contact with you and find out more about the 6 pillars, about One Extraordinary Marriage, about, you called it, about your community? How do people find you?
So the best way and number one way is oneextraordinarymarriage.com. That's the number one way. Just jump on there. You'll find everything about us. You're probably listening to this on your favorite podcast app. Hit that little search and type One Extraordinary Marriage Show. You'll find us. We're in every single app you could possibly imagine. We've been doing that for 12 years. And if you are ready to get on board with the 6 Pillars of Intimacy, you can go to 6pillarsofintimacy.com and you can pick up the book, audio, paperback, Kindle, whatever you choose.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a quiz or a survey or something like that where people can do a self-assessment against the 6 pillars. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And if you want to take the quiz, you can find out what your strongest pillar is. You can go to 6pillarsofintimacy.com/
free quiz.
Quiz.
All right. Well done. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. I adore both of you. This has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time today. And I know that the audience would have learnt just as much as I did. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Mick. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Mick. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Leadership Project at mickspears.com. A huge call out to Faris Sadek for his video editing of all of our video content, and to all of the team at TLP. Joanne Goes On, Gerald Calabo, and my amazing wife, Say Spears. I could not do this show without you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leadership Project YouTube channel, where we bring you interesting videos each and every week. And you can follow us on social, particularly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, in the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and join us on this journey as we learn together and lead together.